In the darkest corners of space, where civilizations wage wars that span galaxies and species fight for survival among the stars, there exists a simple truth that most beings have forgotten. Sometimes the greatest weapon against despair isn't a plasma rifle or a battleship. It's genuine happiness. When Sergeant Marcus Chun crash-landed on the remote planet of Kepler, 442b, he expected to die alone, another casualty of the brutal Terran-Zilithian conflict. What he didn't expect was to encounter a young alien girl whose pure joy and unshakable optimism would not only save his life, but challenge everything he thought he knew about war, hope, and what it truly means to be human. This is a story about an unlikely friendship forged in the fires of galactic war, where a battle-hardened soldier discovers that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe comes from the most unexpected source. A small alien child who refuses to let the darkness of war extinguish her light. Get ready for a journey that will remind you why humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons, but our capacity to find hope in the most hopeless situations and to form bonds that transcend species, language, and the very fabric of space itself. The alarm systems of the Terran frigate Defiance screamed their final warnings as Sergeant Marcus Chun wrestled with the controls of his damaged escape pod. Through the reinforced viewport, the hostile surface of Kepler, 442b rushed toward him at terminal velocity, its purple-tinged atmosphere crackling with electrical storms that danced between towering crystalline formations. "Come on, you piece of junk," Marcus muttered through gritted teeth, his hands flying over the emergency controls. The pod stabilizers had taken a direct hit from Zilithian plasma fire during the evacuation, and now he was essentially riding a very expensive coffin toward what would likely be his final resting place. The impact came with bone-jarring force. Marcus felt his consciousness slip away as the pod bounced, rolled, and, finally, came to rest against what sounded like a grove of metallic trees. When awareness returned, it brought with it a symphony of pain from his ribs, left arm, and a gash across his forehead that was steadily leaking blood into his eyes. Emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows inside the cramped pod as Marcus ran through his mental checklist. Breathing? Check. No puncturlangs. Vision? Blurry but functional. Limbs? His left arm was definitely broken, but everything else seemed to work. The bigger concern was his situation. Marcus activated his wrist communicator, hoping against hope for some signal from the fleet. Static answered him. He tried the emergency beacon. More static. The pod's long-range communications array had been destroyed in the crash, leaving him completely cut off from any Terran forces. He checked his supplies with growing dread. 3 days of water, 5 days of emergency rations, 1 functioning sidearm with 2 spare energy cells, basic medical kit, survival gear designed for short-term emergencies, not extended isolation on a hostile alien world. The pod's atmospheric sensors showed the outside air was breathable, if a bit thin. Gravity was about 80% of Earth normal. Temperature readings indicated it was pleasantly warm outside, which was something of a miracle given that this was supposed to be a dead world according to the stellar cartography databases. Marcus spent the next hour carefully extracting himself from the wreckage and setting up a basic perimeter. The pod had crashed in what appeared to be a natural clearing surrounded by the strangest forest he had ever seen. The trees, if they could be called that, were tall spires of what looked like living crystal, each one humming with a faint musical tone when the wind passed through them. The ground was covered in something that resembled grass, but felt more like soft metal fibers under his boots. The sky above was a swirling canvas of purple and gold, with 2 small moons visible even in daylight. In the distance, Marcus could see towering mountain ranges that seemed to shift color as clouds passed over them. It would have been beautiful under different circumstances. He was checking the pod's emergency supplies when he heard it. Laughter. Marcus froze, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm. The sound was unmistakably organic, definitely intelligent, and absolutely joyous. It rang through the crystal forest like the tinkling of wind chimes, full of genuine delight and completely at odds with his current situation. Moving carefully through the metallic undergrowth, Marcus followed the sound to its source and felt his jaw drop. In a small clearing not 50 meters from his crash site, a small figure was dancing among floating lights that sparkled like miniature stars. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old by human standards, though her alien nature was immediately apparent. Her skin had a subtle silver sheen that caught the light, and her large, expressive eyes were the color of deep ocean water. She had no hair, but instead possessed delicate, leaf-like appendages that grew from her scalp and moved gently in the breeze. She wore simple clothing that seemed to be woven from the same metallic fibers that cover the ground. What struck Marcus most, however, was her expression of pure, uninhibited joy. She was laughing with the kind of genuine happiness that he had not seen in years of warfare. The floating lights around her responded to her movements, growing brighter when she spun, dimming to soft pulses when she stood still. For several minutes, Marcus simply watched, transfixed. This child was playing in a world that should have been barren, creating beauty in a place that his maps said was lifeless. She was proof that the galaxy still held wonders beyond the endless cycle of war and destruction that had consumed his adult life. The moment was broken when she suddenly stopped dancing and looked directly at him. Marcus tensed, ready to retreat into the undergrowth. But the child's reaction was not what he expected. She tilted her head curiously, studying him with those remarkable blue eyes, and then she smiled. It was not the cautious expression of someone encountering a potentially dangerous stranger, but rather the delighted grin of a child who had just discovered something wonderful. She said something in a language that sounded like music, her voice carrying the same melodic quality as the wind through the crystal trees. When Marcus didn't respond, she tried again, this time in what he recognized as galactic standard, though her accent was unlike anything he had heard before. "Are you lost too?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine concern despite her young age. Marcus stepped carefully into the clearing, keeping his hands visible and his movements slow and non-threatening. "Yes," he said simply. "My ship crashed." The child's eyes lit up with excitement. "Oh, how wonderful. I mean, not wonderful that you crashed, but wonderful that you're here. I've been alone for such a long time, and now I have a friend." The casual way she declared their friendship caught Marcus off guard. In his experience, relationships were built slowly, tested by time and circumstance. This child, however, seemed to operate on an entirely different set of social rules. "What's your name?" she continued, practically bouncing with enthusiasm. "Marcus," he replied, still trying to process this surreal encounter. "What's yours?" "Zara," she announced proudly. "I've been waiting for someone like you to arrive." "Waiting for someone like me?" "Someone who needs help remembering how to be happy," she said with a matter-of-fact certainty that only children possessed. "You have very sad eyes, Marcus. But don't worry, I'm very good at fixing sad eyes." Before Marcus could respond, Zara had bounded over to where he stood and was examining his injured arm with professional interest. "You're hurt," she observed. "I can help with that, too." She placed her small hands on his broken arm, and Marcus felt a warm, tingling sensation spread through the damaged limb. To his amazement, the pain began to recede, and he could feel the bones knitting themselves back together. Within moments, his arm was completely healed. "How did you do that?" he asked, staring at his perfectly functional arm in disbelief. Zara giggled. "It's easy when you remember that everything is connected. The trees taught me that." She gestured toward the crystal forest around them. "They've been here for thousands of years, learning how to heal and grow and sing together. They taught me their songs." As if responding to her words, the crystal trees began to hum in harmony, their resonant tones creating a complex musical pattern that seemed to vibrate in Marcus's bones. The floating lights that had been dancing around Zara earlier began to multiply, filling the clearing with gentle, warm radiance. "This place," Marcus said, looking around in wonder. "It's not on any of our star charts. How long have you been here?" Zara's expression grew thoughtful. is different here. The trees say I arrived when I was very small, maybe 4 seasons ago, but seasons here last different lengths, so I'm not sure how that translates to other worlds. Where did you come from originally? A shadow passed briefly across her features before the smile returned. A place that isn't there anymore. But that's okay because now I'm here, and now you're here, and we could be happy together. The resilience in her voice humbled Marcus. Here was a child who had apparently lost her entire world, yet she faced each day with boundless optimism and joy. In contrast, he had been ready to give up after a simple crash landing. Zara, he said carefully, do you know if there are other people on this planet? She shook her head. Just us, and the trees, and the lights, and all the little creatures who live in the crystal caves. But that's plenty. There's so much to explore, and so many games to play. Would you like me to show you around? Before Marcus could answer, she had grabbed his newly healed hand and was pulling him deeper into the forest. Despite every military instinct telling him to be cautious, to establish a proper camp, to survey for threats, Marcus found himself following this extraordinary child into her magical world. They spent the rest of the day exploring what Zara proudly called her kingdom. She showed him groves where the crystal trees grew in perfect geometric patterns, their harmonic vibrations creating natural amphitheaters where she performed elaborate dance routines. She led him to streams of liquid light that flowed between the crystal formations, warm to the touch and somehow nourishing to drink. Most remarkably, she introduced him to the planet's indigenous creatures. Small, luminescent beings that looked like living jewels would emerge from the crystal formations to dance around Zara whenever she sang. Larger creatures, resembling six-legged deer with crystal antlers, would approach without fear and allow her to pet them. They know you're safe because you're with me, Zara explained when Marcus marveled at the creature's lack of fear. Everything here can sense feelings. When you're happy, they're happy. When you're sad, they try to help. As evening approached, and the 2 moons rose higher in the purple sky, Zara led Marcus to what she called her home, a natural shelter formed by the intersection of several massive crystal trees. The interior was warm and surprisingly comfortable with soft growth that served as bedding and small alcoves perfect for storing supplies. You can stay here with me, Zara announced as she busied herself preparing what appeared to be a meal from various fruits and vegetables that grew in hidden gardens throughout the crystal forest. We could be a family. The casual way she said it, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, made Marcus's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. When was the last time someone had wanted him around simply for the joy of his company? When had he last felt welcome anywhere? As they shared their simple meal under the soft glow of the floating lights, Marcus found himself telling Zara about his life. He spoke of growing up in a colony world that was constantly under threat, of joining the military to protect people he cared about, of watching too many friends die in battles that seemed increasingly pointless as the war dragged on year after year. Zara listened with the kind of focused attention that most adults couldn't manage, occasionally asking questions that showed she was truly trying to understand his experiences. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You've been carrying sadness for a very long time," she said finally. "But sadness isn't meant to be carried forever. It's meant to be felt and learned from and then let go so there's room for happiness." "It's not that simple," Marcus replied. "Some things can't be forgotten or forgiven." "I didn't say forgotten," Zara corrected gently. "I said let go. They're different things. Look," she picked up a smooth stone from beside the crystal tree and held it in her palm. "I can remember this stone, know everything about it, but still put it down when my hand gets tired of holding it." She placed the stone on the ground between them. "The stone is still there. I still know about it. But now my hand is free to hold other things like your hand or a flower or one of the light dancers." As if summoned by her words, several of the small luminescent creatures emerged from the crystal formations and began their intricate aerial dance around the shelter. Their movements painted trails of soft light in the air, creating patterns of beauty that took Marcus's breath away. "Tomorrow," Zara announced as she settled down on her bed of soft crystal growths, "I'll teach you how to talk to the trees, and how to call the light dancers. And maybe, if you're ready, I'll show you the singing caves where you can hear the planet's heartbeat." As Marcus made himself comfortable on his own improvised bed, he realized that for the first time in years, he was actually looking forward to tomorrow. This strange, wonderful child had somehow managed to plant a seed of hope in the barren ground of his war-weary soul. Outside their crystal shelter, the forest hummed its eternal song, and the floating lights danced their ancient patterns. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the calls of the crystal-antlered creatures as they moved through the night. This world that wasn't supposed to exist was very much alive, and somehow, impossibly, it was beginning to heal something in him that he had thought was broken beyond repair. Before sleep took him, Marcus made a silent promise to himself and to Zara. He would learn to see this world through her eyes. He would remember what it felt like to find joy in simple things. And perhaps, in doing so, he would discover that even a tired old soldier could still find reasons to hope. Marcus woke to the sound of gentle music and found Zara sitting cross-legged beside a cluster of crystal formations, her eyes closed in concentration. The morning light filtering through the crystal trees cast rainbow patterns across the shelter, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with an energy he was only beginning to understand. "Good morning, Marcus," Zara called without opening her eyes. "The trees say it's going to be a perfect day for learning." "The trees told you that?" Marcus asked, sitting up and working the stiffness out of his shoulders. Zara opened her eyes and grinned at him. "Not with words, silly. With feelings. Everything here talks with feelings. You just have to remember how to listen." She bounded to her feet with the endless energy that seemed to characterize her every movement. "Come on, I'll show you. But first we need breakfast." Breakfast turned out to be an adventure in itself. Zara led him to a grove where the crystal trees bore fruit that looked like geometric gems, but tasted like the sweetest mangoes Marcus had ever experienced. She showed him how to identify which fruits were ripe by the way they hummed when touched, and how the trees would lower their branches to make harvesting easier if approached with the right attitude. "You have to ask nicely," Zara explained as she demonstrated, placing her small hand on the trunk of a particularly tall tree. The massive crystal formation actually seemed to bend slightly, bringing its fruit-bearing branches within reach. "They like to help, but only if you remember to say please and thank you." Marcus felt somewhat ridiculous talking to a tree, but when he awkwardly placed his hand on the trunk and mumbled a polite request, he was amazed to feel the crystal surface warm under his touch. The tree's harmonic tone shifted to what he could only describe as a welcoming frequency, and the branches dipped lower. "See?" Zara clapped her hands in delight. "You're already learning." After their meal, Zara began what she called Marcus's real education. She led him to different groves throughout the forest, each one unique in its harmonic patterns and crystalline structures. In some areas, the trees grew in perfect spirals that created natural amphitheaters where sound was amplified and purified. In others, they formed complex geometric patterns that seemed to channel the planet's mysterious energy into visible streams of light. "This is where I learned to dance with the light singers," Zara said, as they entered a clearing where dozens of the small luminescent creatures were already performing their aerial ballet. "They taught me that movement can be a language all its own." She began to dance, her movements flowing and graceful despite her young age. As she moved, the light singers responded, their trails of luminescence weaving around her in increasingly complex patterns. Soon, Marcus realized he was watching something far more sophisticated than simple play. This was communication, a conversation conducted entirely through movement and light. When the dance concluded, Zara turned to Marcus with sparkling eyes. "Your turn." "I don't dance," Marcus protested. "I'm a soldier, not a performer." "Everyone dances," Zara replied matter-of-factly. Some people just forget how. The light singers don't care if you're graceful or clumsy. They only care if you're trying to talk to them. Despite his protests, Marcus found himself attempting to copy Zara's movements. He felt awkward and foolish at first, but something remarkable began to happen. The light singers, rather than ignoring his clumsy efforts, seemed to find them endearing. They began to dance around him in simple patterns, as if they were teaching him the basic steps of their luminous language. Gradually, Marcus began to relax into the movement. His military training had taught him to be aware of his body's position and movement in combat situations, and he found he could adapt those skills to this entirely different kind of physical expression. He would never be as naturally graceful as Zara, but by the end of the session, he was managing to maintain a simple conversation with the creatures through dance. "That was wonderful," Zara exclaimed as the light singers gradually dispersed back to their crystal homes. "You have a very honest way of moving." The light singers appreciate honesty. From there, they moved to what Zara called the listening groves, areas where the crystal trees had grown into complex formations that amplified and focused the planet's natural harmonics. Here, Zara taught Marcus to quiet his mind and truly listen to the world around him. "Most people think silence means no sound," she explained as they sat at the base of a massive crystal formation that hummed with barely audible tones. "But real silence is when you stop the noise inside your head, so you can hear everything else." Marcus had learned meditation techniques during his military training, methods for staying calm under pressure, and maintaining focus during long missions. But this was different. Instead of blocking out external stimuli, Zara was teaching him to open himself to them, to become receptive to the subtle communications happening all around them. As he sat quietly, following her instructions to breathe in rhythm with the crystal tree's harmonic cycles, Marcus began to perceive layers of sound and sensation he had never noticed before. The trees were indeed communicating, not through words, but through complex patterns of vibration and resonance. The ground itself seemed to pulse with a slow, steady rhythm that felt like a massive heartbeat. Most remarkably, he began to sense emotions emanating from the living things around them. The crystal trees radiated a deep, patient contentment. The small creatures that lived in their crystalline hollows projected feelings of safety and belonging. And from Zara herself came waves of pure, uncomplicated joy that seemed to touch everything nearby. "Can you feel it?" Zara whispered, her voice barely audible above the harmonic chorus of the forest. "Yes," Marcus replied, amazed. "It's like everything here is connected." "Not like," Zara corrected gently. "Everything is connected. The trees know this. The light singers know this. The crystal runners know this. Only thinking beings like us sometimes forget." They spent hours in the listening grove, and Marcus felt layers of stress and tension he hadn't even realized he was carrying begin to melt away. The constant hypervigilance that had kept him alive through years of warfare, the perpetual readiness for threat and conflict, gradually gave way to a deep sense of peace. As the day progressed, Zara led him to increasingly wondrous locations throughout her crystalline kingdom. She showed him caves where the walls were lined with formations that created three-dimensional images when light passed through them, a natural cinema where the planet's history played out in shifting patterns of color and shadow. "This is how I learned about the people who used to live here," Zara explained as they watched scenes of a graceful, crystalline species going about their daily lives in cities that seemed to grow organically from the landscape itself. They were called the Resonance, and they lived in harmony with the planet for millions of years. "What happened to them?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Zara's expression grew sad for the first time since he had met her. "The same thing that happened to my people. The same thing that's happening to yours." War came. The crystal images shifted, showing scenes of devastation as strange ships appeared in the skies above the resonant cities. Marcus recognized the vessels with a chill, They were Zilithian warships, the same design as the fleet that had destroyed his own ship. The Zilithians came here 50 years ago, Zara continued, her voice heavy with sorrow. They wanted the crystals for their weapons. The resonance tried to explain that taking the crystals would kill the planet, but the Zilithians didn't listen. They never listened. The images showed the final battle, the last desperate stand of the resonance as their living cities were strip-mined and destroyed. But then something unexpected happened. As the Zilithians prepared to harvest the largest crystal formations, the planet itself seemed to fight back. The crystals began to sing in unison, creating harmonics that interfered with Zilithian technology and eventually forced them to retreat. The planet saved itself, Zara said softly. But the resonance were gone. The crystals have been singing their memory song ever since, keeping their culture alive in music and light. Marcus felt a familiar anger rising in his chest, the same rage that had driven him through countless battles against the Zilithians. But as the emotion built, something unexpected happened. The crystal trees around them began to resonate with his feelings, their harmonic tones shifting to match his emotional state. The change was jarring, creating discord in what had been perfect harmony. "You're hurting the music," Zara said quietly. "Anger makes everything sound wrong." Marcus looked around at the crystal forest, seeing how his emotional state was affecting the environment. The tree songs had become harsh and discordant. The light singers had fled. Even the soft glow of the crystal formations had dimmed. "I can't just turn off my anger," he said. "These creatures destroyed 2 entire civilizations." "I didn't say turn it off," Zara replied. "I said don't let it hurt the music. Watch." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, and Marcus could feel her acknowledge her own sorrow over the loss of both her people and the resonance. But instead of letting that sadness turn to anger, she seemed to transform it into something else. A deep compassion for all beings who had suffered, combined with a determination to preserve and protect the beauty that remained. As her emotional state shifted, the crystal forest responded. The harmonic discord gradually resolved into a new song, one that acknowledged loss and pain, but ultimately affirmed life and hope. It was heartbreakingly beautiful, and Marcus found his own anger beginning to transform into something more constructive. "The trees taught me this," Zara explained as the forest song reached a new equilibrium. "They remember the resonance not with sadness, but with gratitude for the beauty they created. They honor my lost people not with anger at those who destroyed them, but with joy for the time we had together." She opened her eyes and looked at Marcus with an expression far too wise for her apparent age. "Anger protects us when we're in danger, but it poisons everything else when we hold on to it too long. The Zilithians are already gone from here. Your anger can't hurt them, but it can hurt this place, and it can hurt you." Marcus sat in contemplative silence as he processed this lesson. Everything Zara was teaching him went against his military training, which emphasized channeling anger and aggression into tactical advantages against enemy forces. But here, in this place of living harmony, he could see how destructive emotions created literal discord in the environment. "How do you do it?" he asked finally. "How do you stay happy when you've lost everything?" Zara tilted her head thoughtfully. "I haven't lost everything. I lost my old everything, but then I found new everything. The trees, the light singers, the planet itself. They all became my family. And now you're here too, so my family got bigger again." She stood up and took his hand, leading him toward another section of the forest. "Besides, happiness isn't something you keep. It's something you make every day with every choice. Even when sad things happen, you can still choose to find something beautiful." As if to demonstrate her point, she led him to a grove where the crystal trees had grown into the shape of a perfect spiral, their combined harmonics creating a natural symphony that was breathtakingly beautiful. At the center of the spiral was a small pool of liquid light, its surface reflecting not just their images, but somehow their emotions as well. "This is the heart of the forest," Zara explained. All the other groves connect to this place through the root systems. When you put your hands in the water, you can feel everything that's connected to it. Marcus approached the pool cautiously, but when he placed his hands in the warm, glowing liquid, he was overwhelmed by the sensation of connection. He could feel the vast network of crystal trees stretching across the planet's surface, all of them linked in a single, living entity. He could sense the countless small creatures that made their homes throughout the crystalline ecosystem. Most powerfully, he could feel the accumulated memories and emotions of everyone who had ever touched this water. The resonance were there, their deep appreciation for harmony and beauty still echoing through the system decades after their physical extinction. Zara's people were there too, her memories of them preserved in the planet's living network. And now he realized his own thoughts and feelings were becoming part of this vast, interconnected consciousness. But rather than feeling violated or overwhelmed, Marcus felt profoundly comforted. For the first time in his adult life, he truly understood what it meant to belong to something larger than himself. The loneliness and isolation that had defined his existence as a soldier began to dissolve, replaced by an awareness of his place in the web of life that surrounded him. When he finally withdrew his hands from the pool, Marcus found that the world looked different. The crystal trees seemed more vivid, their songs more complex and meaningful. The light singer's dances told stories he was beginning to understand. Even a simple act of breathing felt like participation in a cosmic conversation. "Now you're really starting to see," Zara said with satisfaction. "Tomorrow, I'll show you how to sing with the planet itself." As they made their way back to their crystal shelter, Marcus reflected on how much his perspective had changed in just 2 days. The warrior who had crash-landed on this world had been focused entirely on survival and escape. But the man walking beside this extraordinary child through a forest of living music was beginning to understand that sometimes the greatest adventures weren't about getting somewhere else, but about learning to truly see where you already were. That night, as he lay on his bed of soft crystal growths listening to the planet's lullaby, Marcus realized that Zara had been right about something important. Happiness really was a choice. Not an easy choice, and not one that ignored or minimized suffering, but a deliberate decision to remain open to wonder and beauty even in the darkest circumstances. For the first time since his ship had been destroyed, Marcus fell asleep smiling. The third morning on Kepler, 442b brought with it a strange atmospheric phenomenon that Zara called a harmony storm. Marcus woke to find the crystal trees singing in perfect unison, their combined voices creating sound waves so powerful they were visible as ripples in the air itself. The sky had turned a deep gold color, and streams of aurora-like energy flowed between the crystalline formations like rivers of light. "Isn't it magnificent?" Zara exclaimed, practically vibrating with excitement as she stood outside their shelter with her arms spread wide. The harmony storms only happen a few times each season. It's when the planet shares its deepest songs with the universe. Marcus stepped outside and immediately felt the power of the phenomenon. The harmonics weren't just audible, they seemed to resonate in his bones, his blood, the very cells of his body. The effect was indescribably beautiful, but also overwhelming in its intensity. "The first time I experienced one of these, I thought I was going to die," Zara continued, her voice somehow carrying clearly despite the tremendous volume of the crystal chorus. "But then I learned to sing along, and everything changed." She began to hum, and Marcus was amazed to hear her voice harmonizing perfectly with the planet's song. As she found her rhythm within the vast musical composition, the visible sound waves began to flow around her, creating patterns of light that danced across her silver-sheen skin. "Can you teach me?" Marcus asked, having to shout to be heard above the crystalline symphony. Zara's face lit up with joy. "I was hoping you would ask. But, Marcus, this is different from everything else I've shown you. When you join your voice to a harmony storm, you don't just sing with the planet. You become part of it temporarily. It's wonderful, but It can also be frightening if you're not ready. Despite her warning, or perhaps because of it, Marcus felt compelled to try. The military training that had dominated his adult life had taught him to face challenges head-on, and this seemed like the most important challenge he had encountered on this remarkable world. Under Zara's guidance, Marcus began by simply listening, trying to identify the individual harmonic threads that wove together to create the storm's overwhelming symphony. Gradually, he began to understand that what had seemed like chaotic noise was actually an incredibly complex musical composition with distinct melodies, rhythms, and harmonic progressions. "Start with the deep tones," Zara instructed, her small hand placed over his chest to help him feel the bass frequencies that seemed to emanate from the planet's core. Those are like the heartbeat of the song. Once you can match those, the higher harmonies will show you where to go next. Marcus had never considered himself a singer, but as he began to hum along with the lowest frequencies of the harmony storm, he discovered that his voice had a natural resonance with the planet's deeper songs. The crystal formations around them responded to his tentative participation, their light patterns shifting to include new colors and shapes. As his confidence grew, Marcus began to add higher harmonies, following Zara's lead as she wove increasingly complex melodic lines around the fundamental bass tones. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It felt as though his consciousness was expanding beyond the boundaries of his individual body to become part of something vast and interconnected. For hours, they sang with the harmony storm, and Marcus began to understand what Zara had meant about becoming part of the planet. Through the harmonic connection, he could sense the vast network of crystal formations that covered the world's surface, each one contributing its unique voice to the planetary song. He could feel the presence of every living creature, from the tiniest light dancers to massive beings that dwelt in the deep crystal caverns far below the surface. Most remarkably, he began to perceive the planet's memories directly. Through the harmonic link, he experienced fragments of the resonant civilization at its height, their cities that grew like music made solid, their art that existed in dimensions beyond the visual, their philosophy that treated all existence as a single, ongoing conversation between consciousness and cosmos. But he also experienced their destruction, and for the first time, he understood the true scope of what the galaxy had lost when the Zilithians had invaded this world. The Resonants hadn't just been another alien species. They had been the keepers of a form of consciousness that could literally communicate with planets, that could help worlds develop their own forms of awareness and expression. They were trying to teach other worlds to sing. Marcus said when the harmony storm finally began to subside and normal conversation became possible again, the Resonants weren't just living on this planet. They were helping it become more than it could be alone. Zara nodded solemnly, and they were teaching other species how to do the same thing. My people learned from them. That's why the Zilithians destroyed us too. We were spreading the resonant gift to other worlds. The implications of this revelation struck Marcus like a physical blow. The war between the Terran Federation and the Zilithian Empire wasn't just about territory or resources. It was about fundamentally different approaches to existence itself. The Zilithians sought to dominate and control, while the Resonants and their allies have been trying to foster connection and mutual growth. "Is that why you were able to heal my arms so easily?" he asked. "Because your people learned resonant techniques?" "Partly," Zara replied, "but also because healing is just another form of harmony. When something is broken, you help it remember how to sing its proper song again." To demonstrate, she approached a crystal tree that had been damaged by Marcus's crash landing. Several of its branches had been snapped off, and its harmonic tone was noticeably discordant compared to the others in the grove. Placing her hands on the damaged trunk, Zara began to hum softly. Marcus watched in fascination as the tree's broken branches began to regenerate, new crystalline growth extending from the damaged areas. More importantly, the tree song gradually shifted from discord back to harmony, finding its place once again in the forest's overall symphony. "Everything wants to be whole," Zara explained as she stepped back to admire the restored tree. Sometimes it just needs to be reminded of what wholeness sounds like. Inspired by her example, Marcus approached another damaged tree nearby. This one had been more severely injured in the crash. Its trunk cracked, and several of its major harmonic chambers shattered. Following Zara's example, he placed his hands on the damaged crystal surface and tried to hum the healing tone she had demonstrated. At first, nothing happened except that the tree's discordant song became even more painful to listen to. But as Marcus persisted, drawing on his newfound understanding of the planet's harmonic principles, something began to shift. The cracked trunk started to resonate with his voice, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the damage began to heal. The process was exhausting in a way that Marcus hadn't expected. It wasn't physically demanding, but it required a kind of emotional and spiritual focus that drew on resources he hadn't known he possessed. By the time the tree was fully restored, he felt drained but also profoundly fulfilled. "You're learning faster than I thought possible," Zara said with obvious pride. "It took me months to heal my first tree, and that was with the resonant archives to guide me." "Résonant archive?" Marcus asked. Zara's expression became mysterious. "I haven't shown you the deep caves yet. That's where the real treasures are hidden." She led him to an area of the forest he hadn't seen before, where the crystal trees grew so closely together that they formed natural tunnels and passages. Following her deeper into this maze-like structure, Marcus began to realize that what he had taken for separate trees were actually portions of a single, massive organism that extended far underground. The resonance built their most important archives inside the planet's root system. Zara explained as they descended through crystal passages that glowed with their own internal light. When the Zilithians attacked, the survivors tried to preserve their knowledge by merging it directly with the living crystal network. The passages opened into a vast underground chamber that took Marcus's breath away. The walls were covered in crystalline formations that pulsed with patterns of light so complex they seemed to move with their own intelligence. As his eyes adjusted to the chamber's unique lighting, Marcus began to realize that the light patterns weren't random. They were information, vast libraries of knowledge encoded in living crystal. "This is how I learned to speak galactic standard," Zara said as she approached one of the crystal walls and placed her hand against its surface. "And how I learned about the war, and about your people, and about the choice that's coming." "What choice?" Marcus asked, though something in her tone made him suspect he might not want to hear the answer. Zara's expression grew serious. "The Zilithians are coming back, Marcus. The harmony storms we've been experiencing aren't natural. They're the planet trying to prepare itself for another attack. It's been building its defenses for 50 years, and now it's almost ready." As if responding to her words, the crystal formations around them began to pulse with new patterns of light. Marcus found himself understanding, somehow, that he was looking at tactical displays, star charts showing fleet movements, energy analyses of Zilithian weapon systems, defensive plans that incorporated the planet's entire crystal network as a single, massive weapon system. "The planet knows about the war," Zara continued. "It's been monitoring Zilithian communications, tracking their fleet movements, preparing for their return. And it knows about you two." "About me specifically?" Marcus asked, feeling a chill of premonition. "About humans in general. The planet has been learning about your species through the few Terran signals that have reached this system. It knows that humans and Zilithians are enemies, which makes humans potential allies." The tactical displays shifted, showing what Marcus recognized as the current positions of Terran and Zilithian fleets. The information was more detailed and up-to-date than anything in his military briefings had been. This planet wasn't just a hidden refuge. It was an intelligence-gathering station with capabilities that surpassed anything either side in the war possessed. "There's something else," Zara said quietly. "The planet has been calling for help, sending out harmonic signals that only certain kinds of consciousness could detect. It called to me when my world was destroyed, and it called to you when your ship was in danger." Marcus stared at her in shock. "You're saying it caused my crash?" "Not caused," Zara corrected. guided. Your ship was already damaged and failing. But instead of letting you die in space, the planet pulled you here. It needs us, Marcus. The implications of this revelation were staggering. His presence here wasn't an accident or even a stroke of luck. It was part of some larger plan that involved forces beyond his comprehension. The question was whether he was prepared to be part of that plan. "What does it need us for?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew. Zara gestured toward the tactical displays surrounding them. "To help it fight." The resonance could communicate directly with planetary consciousness, but they're gone. My people could learn their techniques, but we're scattered and few. Humans, though, humans have something special. "What's that?" "You adapt," Zara said simply. Every other species in the galaxy has evolved to fit specific environmental niches. But humans can learn to survive anywhere, to work with any kind of consciousness, to find ways to connect with forms of life that seem completely alien. That's why you've been able to learn the planet's songs so quickly, because humans are natural bridges between different forms of awareness. Marcus looked around at the vast archive chamber, at the wealth of knowledge and capability that surrounded them, and felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He had come here as a crash soldier, hoping only to survive. Now he was being asked to become something much more significant, a link between humanity and a form of consciousness that could change the course of the galactic war. "If I agree to help," he said slowly, "what would that mean for my people, for the war?" The crystal displays shifted again, showing scenarios that made Marcus's heart race with possibility. Planets that could defend themselves against Zilithian attacks. Entire systems linked in harmonic networks that could coordinate defense strategies across interstellar distances. Human colonies that had learned to live in true partnership with the worlds they inhabited. "It means," Zara said with a smile that held both hope and sadness, "that the galaxy might finally have a chance to choose harmony over conquest." As they made their way back to the surface, Marcus's mind was spinning with the magnitude of what he had learned. The choice Zara had mentioned wasn't just about whether to help this planet defend itself. It was about whether to become part of an entirely new approach to galactic civilization. That evening, as they sat beside the central pool sharing another simple meal, Marcus found himself studying Zara with new understanding. She wasn't just a remarkable child who had managed to stay happy despite losing everything. She was the last keeper of knowledge that could reshape the galaxy's future. The responsibility she carried was enormous, yet she bore it with the same joyful grace that characterized everything else about her. "Aren't you afraid?" he asked her as the crystal trees began their evening lullaby. Zara considered the question seriously before answering. "Sometimes, but fear is just another song, Marcus. You can let it make harsh noise that hurts everything around you, or you can find the harmony in it that helps you stay alert and careful while still being open to beauty." She reached over and took his hand, her small fingers warm and strong. "Besides, I'm not alone anymore. We'll face whatever comes together, and together we can sing a stronger song than either of us could manage alone." As the twin moons rose overhead and the forest settled into its nightly rhythm, Marcus realized that he had already made his choice. He would stay. He would learn everything this world could teach him. And when the Zilithians returned, he would help ensure that they faced not just a planet, but a new form of consciousness that represented the galaxy's hope for a better future. The war was far from over, but for the first time since it began, Marcus believed it was possible to win not just battles, but the peace that would follow. 3 months had passed since Marcus's arrival on Kepler, 442b, when the planet's early warning systems detected the approaching Zilithian fleet. The crystal trees throughout the forest began singing in urgent, complex harmonies that conveyed tactical information with a precision that would have made any military commander envious. Enemy fleet strength, estimated arrival time, weapon configurations, all of it was encoded in music that Marcus had learned to read as easily as traditional battle displays. 47 ships, he said, interpreting the harmonic data as he and Zara stood in the central grove. 3 dreadnoughts, 12 heavy cruisers, and 32 support vessels. They'll be in system within 6 hours. Zara nodded grimly, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by the focused intensity of someone preparing for battle. Over the past months, she had been teaching Marcus not just to communicate with the planet, but to help coordinate its defensive systems. What he had learned had revolutionized his understanding of warfare itself. "The planet is ready," she said, placing her hand on the massive central crystal that served as the primary node for the world's consciousness. "All defensive networks are online, and the harmonic disruptors are charged to full capacity." Marcus still found it hard to believe what this world was capable of when fully activated for war. The entire crystal forest was essentially a single, massive weapons system that could project harmonic frequencies capable of disrupting Zilithian technology across interplanetary distances. But it was also something far more sophisticated, a coordinated consciousness that could think and react faster than any artificial intelligence ever created. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Marcus asked, placing his own hand on the crystal beside hers. Through the harmonic link, he could feel the planet's determination, but also its reluctance to engage in violence. "There might be another way." Zara's expression softened slightly. "I've tried to find one, Marcus. For 3 months, I've been reaching out through the harmonic network, trying to establish communication with the Zilithian fleet. But they refuse to listen. They're here for one purpose, to harvest the crystals and destroy anything that stands in their way. Through the planet's sensory network, they could now monitor the approaching fleet's communications. The Zilithian commander, Admiral Vaska, was the same officer who had led the assault 50 years earlier. His intention was clear from the intercepted transmissions: complete extraction of the planet's crystal resources, regardless of the environmental consequences. "They remember what happened last time," Marcus said, analyzing the enemy's formation patterns. "They're coming in with full shields and harmonic dampeners. They think they've learned how to counter the planet's defenses." "They have learned some things," Zara admitted, "but they don't understand the real nature of what they're facing. Last time, the planet fought alone, trying to protect the residents who couldn't defend themselves. This time is different." She was right, and Marcus knew it. The planet's consciousness had evolved significantly over the past 50 years, incorporating new capabilities and strategies. More importantly, it now had allies who understood both warfare and harmony: Zara with her inherited knowledge of resonant techniques, and Marcus with his military experience and growing ability to bridge human and planetary consciousness. "Initiate the first phase," Zara said, her voice carrying the formal tone she used when interfacing directly with the planet's command systems. Around them, the forest responded with a harmony so complex and powerful that Marcus felt it in his bones. This wasn't the gentle music he had grown accustomed to during his time here. This was the planet preparing for war, its full capabilities finally unleashed. The crystal trees began to resonate in perfect synchronization, creating standing wave patterns that extended far into space. At the same time, the planet's vast root network, which Marcus now knew extended through the entire planet's crust, began generating harmonic frequencies that turned the world itself into a massive transmitter. In orbit around the planet, the first of the Zilithian scout ships encountered something completely unexpected. Their sensors, designed to detect conventional threats, began registering energy readings that made no sense according to their understanding of physics. The harmonic frequencies being generated by the planet were creating interference patterns in the quantum foam of space-time itself, making accurate navigation and targeting impossible. "First scout ship is falling back," Marcus reported, reading the tactical data flowing through the harmonic network. "They're having trouble maintaining formation integrity." But the Zilithians were not easily deterred. Admiral Vaska had prepared for this encounter for 5 decades, developing new technologies specifically designed to counter harmonic weapons. As the main fleet approached the planet's outer defenses, They activated massive dampening fields that created zones of artificial silence around their ships. Clever, Zara admitted as she watched the enemy's countermeasures take effect. But they're still thinking in terms of conventional warfare. They see the harmonics as weapons to be blocked, not as communication to be understood. She closed her eyes and began to sing, her voice joining with the planet's defensive symphony. But instead of adding to the aggressive frequencies being directed at the enemy fleet, she began weaving a different kind of song, one designed not to attack, but to reach out. Marcus felt the shift in strategy through his harmonic connection to the planet's consciousness. Rather than trying to overwhelm the Zilithian dampening fields with brute force, they were going to try something that had never been attempted before: direct communication with the enemy commanders through harmonic frequencies that could penetrate their technological defenses and speak directly to their biological consciousness. You're trying to talk to them, Marcus realized. Every being in the galaxy has the capacity for harmonic perception, Zara explained without breaking her song. The Zilithians have just forgotten how to use it, but forgotten doesn't mean gone. Through the planet's enhanced senses, Marcus could monitor the effects of this new strategy on the Zilithian fleet. The harmonic patterns Zara was generating were designed to resonate with the neurological structures common to most oxygen-breathing species. Instead of being blocked by the ship's dampening fields, these frequencies were actually being conducted through the hulls and into the vessel's atmospheres. The results were immediate and dramatic. On the bridge of the lead dreadnought, Admiral Vasca found himself experiencing something he had never encountered before: direct emotional input from an alien consciousness. Through the harmonic link, he was feeling the planet's perspective on the conflict, its memory of the devastation caused by the previous Zilithian attack, and its desperate desire to avoid repeating that tragedy. "What is this?" the Admiral demanded, but his subordinates were experiencing the same phenomenon and had no answers to offer. Through Zara's harmonic song, the planet was sharing not just its own perspective, but the accumulated wisdom of the resonant civilization. The Zilithian commanders found themselves experiencing memories of a galaxy where different species worked together to develop their home worlds into living partnerships between consciousness and matter. They saw what their own worlds might become if they abandoned their philosophy of conquest and domination. For several minutes, the Zilithian fleet held position as its crews struggled to understand what was happening to them. Some of the younger officers began to respond positively to the harmonic communication, their natural empathic abilities awakening for the first time in their lives. But Admiral Vasca, hardened by decades of warfare, managed to resist the planet's attempts at communication. "Deploy the resonance scramblers," he ordered. "Full-spectrum interference. I don't care what kind of alien mind tricks they're using. We came here to complete our mission." The fleet activated new weapons systems that Marcus had never seen before, devices that generated chaotic harmonic patterns designed to disrupt the planet's carefully orchestrated consciousness. The effect was like listening to beautiful music being torn apart by random noise, and Marcus felt the planet's pain through their connection. "They're hurting it," he said, his hands clenched into fists as he felt the planet's agony. But Zara's expression remained calm. "Pain is just another form of song, Marcus. Even chaos has patterns if you know how to listen for them." She began to modify her harmonic output, not fighting against the resonant scramblers, but actually incorporating their chaotic frequencies into the planet's defensive symphony. It was an incredibly complex musical technique, like improvising a jazz solo that turned noise into rhythm and discord into harmony. The effect on the Zilithian fleet was immediate. Their resonance scramblers, instead of disrupting the planet's consciousness, began to amplify it. The chaotic frequencies they were generating became part of a larger harmonic pattern that reached even deeper into the biological consciousness of the fleet's crews. On ships throughout the Zilithian formation, crew members began to experience something unprecedented in their species' recent history: direct empathic connection with other forms of consciousness. They could feel the planet's pain, but also its hope. They could sense the memories of the resonance, but also the potential for their own species to rediscover harmony. Most significantly, they began to feel Marcus's perspective on the conflict. Through the harmonic link, the Zilithian soldiers experience human memories of loss and determination of protecting the innocent and fighting for something greater than personal gain. They felt what it was like to be a warrior who chose to put down his weapons and learn a better way. Impossible, Admiral Vasca muttered as he felt his own consciousness being touched by alien perspectives. We are the conquerors. We take what we need. We don't. But even his resistance was beginning to crumble as the harmonic communication showed him visions of what his own homeworld might become if the Zilithians learned to work with planetary consciousness instead of exploiting it. He saw cities that grew like music, technology that enhanced rather than replaced natural systems, and his own people finding joy in creation rather than destruction. The moment of choice arrived when the planet offered the Zilithian fleet something no enemy had ever offered them before: not surrender, not submission, but partnership. Through Zara's harmonic translation, the planet's consciousness reached out to every member of the enemy fleet, offering to teach them the same techniques that had healed Marcus's injuries and restored his capacity for wonder. We can show you how to heal your own worlds, the harmonic message conveyed. Your people don't have to live on dead planets, consuming the resources of others to survive. We can teach you how to awaken the consciousness of your homeworlds, how to live in partnership with living planets that can provide for all your needs. For long moments, the entire fleet hung motionless in space as its crews processed this offer. Marcus could feel the internal conflict raging within the Zilithian consciousness as they struggled between their ingrained patterns of conquest and this new possibility being offered to them. The decision came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Keshna, a young Zilithian communications officer aboard one of the support vessels, had been monitoring the harmonic transmissions more closely than anyone else. Through the planet's communication, she had experienced not just the offer of partnership, but actual memories of what such partnerships could accomplish. "Admiral," she transmitted on the fleet's command frequency, her voice shaking with emotion, "I request permission to establish formal diplomatic contact with the planetary consciousness." "Absolutely not," Vasca replied. "We have our orders. Begin bombardment of the primary crystal formations." But something remarkable happened as the fleet prepared to attack. Instead of following their admiral's commands, nearly half of the Zilithian ships broke formation and began transmitting surrender codes. The harmonic communication had awakened something in their crews that had been dormant for generations: the capacity to choose cooperation over conquest. "This is mutiny," Vasca declared, but his voice lacked conviction. Through the harmonic link, he could feel his own officers questioning their mission for the first time in their careers. The planet's response to this unprecedented situation was to offer the mutinying ships something even more remarkable: direct landing coordinates and an invitation to establish the first Zilithian colony based on harmonic partnership with a planetary consciousness. Marcus watched in amazement as nearly 20 Zilithian vessels began descent procedures toward the planet's surface. "They're actually doing it," he said. "They're choosing a different path." But the crisis wasn't over yet. Admiral Vasca, faced with the collapse of his command structure, made the decision that Marcus had been dreading. Rather than accept defeat or consider the possibility of partnership, he ordered his remaining ships to begin bombardment of not just the crystal formations, but the landing zones where his own former subordinates were establishing peaceful contact. If they want to betray their own species, Vasca transmitted, then they can die with the aliens. The planet's response was swift and decisive. Every crystal formation on the planet's surface began to resonate in perfect harmony, generating a focused harmonic beam that reached across space to envelope the Admiral's flagship. But instead of destroying the vessel, the harmonic energy did something far more sophisticated. It induced a state of forced empathic connection between Vasca and every being his actions would harm. For the first time in his life, The Admiral experienced the full emotional impact of his own violence. He felt what it was like to be on the receiving end of orbital bombardment, to watch one's home being destroyed by an implacable enemy, to lose everything to someone who saw him as nothing more than an obstacle to resource extraction. The experience was so overwhelming that Vasca collapsed on his bridge, his consciousness unable to process the full weight of the suffering he had caused throughout his military career. When he finally recovered, he found himself weeping, another first in his adult life. "Stand down," he whispered, then louder, "All ships stand down. I need to speak with the planetary consciousness." The final phase of the battle, if it could be called that, was unlike anything in the recorded history of galactic warfare. Instead of victory and defeat, there was transformation and understanding. The Zilithian fleet established a temporary orbital base where their crews could learn harmonic communication techniques, while the planet began the slow process of teaching them how to heal their own homeworlds. Marcus found himself serving as a translator and cultural bridge, helping both sides understand perspectives that had seemed impossible to reconcile just hours earlier. The skills he had learned during his time with Zara, the ability to find harmony in discord, to transform anger into compassion, to see potential for growth even in the most hostile situations, proved invaluable in these unprecedented negotiations. 3 weeks later, as the first joint human-Zilithian planetary research station was being established in the Crystal Forest, Marcus stood with Zara at the edge of the central grove, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed to reflect the new harmony emerging on their world. "Did you ever imagine it would work out this way?" he asked her. Zara smiled, and in her expression Marcus could see not just the joy that had first attracted him to her, but a deep satisfaction at seeing her long-held hopes finally becoming reality. "I hoped," she said simply, "and hope is like any other song. The more voices that join in, the stronger it becomes." Around them, the crystal forest sang its evening lullaby, but now the harmony included new voices. Zilithian researchers were learning to add their own tones to the planet's symphony, while human scientists worked to understand how harmonic consciousness could be applied to healing the war-torn worlds throughout the galaxy. Most remarkably, ships were beginning to arrive from other systems. Vessels carrying refugees from devastated worlds, explorers seeking alternatives to the endless cycle of conflict, and even former enemies who had heard rumors of a place where different species were learning to live in true partnership. As the twin moons rose over this transformed world, Marcus realized that what had begun as a simple crash landing had become something far more significant. He had discovered not just a new way of living, but a new way of being human, one that emphasized connection over isolation, harmony over conflict, and the radical possibility that even the most bitter enemies could learn to sing the same song. The war wasn't over, but it was changing. And at the heart of that change was a simple truth that a remarkable alien child had taught a tired human soldier. Happiness, like harmony, grows stronger when it's shared. In the distance, he could hear the sounds of construction as humans and Zilithians worked together to build something unprecedented in galactic history. A civilization based not on conquest or domination, but on the revolutionary idea that consciousness itself could be the foundation for interstellar cooperation. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in his adult life, Marcus Chun knew that was a very good thing.